Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining me today. It's Allan Laboucan with the Rocks and Stocks News Show. We have another of our segments of talking to executives of the exploration companies. Today, we have Exploits Discovery Corp, and it's Ken Tylee, who's part of the team of geologists running the program. And what really excites me about what they have found is that the Appleton fault in Newfoundland is getting a lot of attention due to the success that Newfound Gold has had drilling a series of zones in an orogenic gold system with quite spectacular results. And Exploits was able to get the ground immediately to the east or north of them and ground to the immediate west of them. And at their northern end of Newfound Gold's property, they found the Everest zone with excellent grades and thickness. And it's in very close proximity to where Exploits has been drilling and had an intersection of over 38 grams of gold, over 2.8 meters. And to put that into context, these outside of the work that Newfound Gold is doing, these are one could argue are the best results outside of Newfound Gold. Newfound Gold has a very high valuation of over $1 billion, and Exploits looks like they could be onto an important discovery there as well. So I'm really happy to have Ken on today to talk. Ken, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Al. Really appreciate the invitation. I'm going to, if I can, I'm going to try and share the screen right now. And
yeah, that would be fantastic.
Okay, can we see these colorful slides here, Al?
No, I'm not showing them as of yet. Are you?
Okay, I will try it here. How's that?
There we go. It's coming up right now. There, we got the slides. Ken, you can let her roll.
Okay, I'll do that. I'll try to maximize the screen here.
I may interrupt you along the way because sometimes I see things that get me excited.
Yeah, no problem. It's that's very fine. And also you can if you find them putting in too much rock talk, just tell me to cool my jets.
No worries. Well, the rock talk leads the truth machine, and the truth machine is what leads to success. And I think you guys are having some very good success so far from your very brand new drilling at the Bullseye project.
Yeah, and I just want to spend some time talking about that this morning. So I'm just going to advance through these slides. These are the typical qualifying statements. This is where our properties are located in central Newfoundland. Can you see my cursor, Al? Yes?
Yep, no problem.
Okay. So as Al was mentioning, Newfound Gold has been very busy down in this Trans-Canada area near the town of Appleton and Gander over the past couple of years. And Exploits was very fortunate to stake claims along this trend, this northwards trend here that you see in blue. And this is our current property position, sort of straddling the Newfound activity. Going to the next slide.
To put that into context, Ken, in these orogenic gold systems, you need very old rock. Secondly, you need a faulting, which are your deep crustal cracks in the earth that allow the gold-bearing fluids to make their way up to the surface. And what also can be quite important is secondary faulting associated with that main fault. So these are the characteristics of how you find an orogenic gold system. I'll let you back at it, Ken.
Okay, and these orogenic gold systems are found in various locations throughout the world, not just confined to Newfoundland. And actually I have a few slides that will explain exactly that. So this is sort of what Barry or Allan was, just talking about. The rocks get progressively deformed. All of this deformation occurred about 500 million years ago out under where I guess you could say, off the coast of where Africa is sitting right now today. The rocks were flat-lying sediments, and they started getting warped and buckled. Everyone's heard of plate tectonics. So these rocks started becoming compressed and folded like this, which we call ductile deformation. And then they could only bend so much, and they started snapping and what we call thrusting. They started creating these sort of sheaves or leaves or segments that were pushed up almost the way at the front end of a snow shovel would look, and plates or slabs, giant slabs of rock, were thrust up against the side of the North American continent where it sits today. And that's why the island of Newfoundland sits where it does. And it's part of the same rocks that you find all the way down the eastern seaboard towards the Carolinas, and even across the ocean over in Ireland. These are the same rocks. They started off life over near Africa, but today, 500 million years later, they're sitting along the eastern seaboard of North America. And this is an example here. These rocks were once, as I said, flat lying, sitting out under the ocean, and they've been slabbed over millions of years. This is a very, very long and involved process. This is what they look like today. And this is also, look at the amount of deformation. It's incredible that rocks can actually bend and deform as much as they are. When you think of something that's really solid, how these rocks can be folded and snapped, and then along come the quartz veins at a later stage. Gaps are created within that deformed rock. Little fractures open up and emanate, and these hot fluids come in at a later date, maybe millions of years later, and they fill all the voids and cracks. So think of it as
because the rock has been prepared for that to have a path of least resistance to make its way into those folded rocks. And this is very important stuff when it comes to an orogenic gold system.
Yes, this is what geologists like myself love to see. We love to see this amount of deformation, little bits of quartz coming through, and alteration. This means that we're getting close to the system. We're in the correct hunting ground. And these rocks, these are obviously from our property in Newfoundland, but I can tell you that, these rocks are very, very similar to the rocks on the Kirkland Lake, Larder Lake, and Timmins areas, where they've produced over 100 million ounces over the past 100 years up in northern Ontario. Very similar system. They see the same things down in Australia, near the huge amounts of production that came from Western Australia. Same system.
Fosterville mine itself, that was a sort of once they found that Swan Zone, was a company maker really for Kirkland Lake, which wasn't a small company to start with, but ultimately their production was so high grade and so low cost that they were one of the had the highest margins and very profitable, made them one of the best performing mining stocks, and ultimately led to them to a 14 or 15 billion dollar buyout. And the prize was that orogenic gold system at the Swan Zone at Fosterville.
And that Swan Zone was deep. I mean, they'd been mining for years and years and years up closer to surface. And then they sort of started taking that risk, taking that leap of faith and drilling down deep. And then boom, they hit.
What makes it interesting also, Ken, is that you guys are you guys and Newfound are finding it much close, that bonanza grade gold much closer to surface.
That's right, almost right up to surface. This is an example. This is a picture here you can see, Allan. This is the core from Keats. This is very close to surface. This is down, the centimeter scale versus the Fosterville we were just talking about. Look, they're almost identical.
Yeah, you can see the sulfides in there, and the quartz and the gold very close to that sulfides.
Again, and this just represents what I was talking about a few minutes ago. Open, close, open, close. This is a very dynamic process that, as I said, goes on sometimes over, let's say, 1 million years. And it's just a series of openings and voids being created, and the quartz veins shoot in, and then they solidify over tens of years, and everything cools down and comes to a halt. And then maybe 1,000 years go by, there's another movement in the plates, those cracks form, those openings evolve, and the late stage quartz, it shoots in a second time and then solidifies, and a third time, and a fourth time, and a fifth time. These are very, very long-lived events, and they carry the gold with them, this fine, fine gold it carries with them. Look at the similarities there. And on this sort of image here, we're trying to show these voids being created between the sandstones and the shales, the little cracks that form and allow those gaps to create. And why we're excited is the discoveries that have been going on by our neighbors down in Newfound sit here along. See this red dashed line, Allan? This is the Appleton fault zone. And this strikes or trends for probably almost 100 kilometers. The Newfound discoveries have been sitting down in here. These areas you see in yellow are the claims that are held by Newfound, by exploits. We're very fortunate.
Ken, one of the reasons that I was originally started following exploits was that I understand that, it's not just one fault that's important. You've got the right rock packages and that faulting that is the conduit. And what I was really impressed with was how you guys have been able to focus your land acquisitions on the Appleton and also some of these other faults that look quite exciting as well. Meanwhile, Appleton has been getting all the attention, but I don't think people should forget the potential on these other faults.
Exactly. It's early days, Allan. That's why I'm trying to show these other dashed lines in here, the Dog Bay line and the Grub line faults. And you see these solid black lines. These are sort of indicated by the airborne geophysics. These represent those splays that you're talking about, those 060 or 070 splays sort of peeling across the faults as those faults were created. And as these splays are these junction points that possibly represent like areas where you could have blowouts or expanded volumes of quartz that have intruded into the area. And that's why our claim position is sort of oriented the way it has been, to include the main breaks plus these splays peeling off.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And so we were really
Ken, sorry to interrupt you so much. You got me really excited, but some have called this that, think of the Abitibi 100 years ago, and it's now produced close to 200 million ounces of gold. And this is like you're brand new it's like rolling back the clock 100 years to the Abitibi, and I don't think that that's out of line sort of analysis.
No, and honestly, that was the reason I joined exploits. I've spent the majority of my career working in the Abitibi, working for the big mines like the Dome mine, the Hoyle Pond mine, working with Rob McEwen at their Black Fox deposit, and it's very, very reminiscent to what we're seeing going on right now in Newfoundland. I look at it as this is probably the early days. This is probably what the Timmins and Kirkland Lake area was like back in the 30s and 40s, right? So this was for me personally, it was a great opportunity to sort of get on board in the early days of something that could possibly develop into like a camp scale production area, which would be fantastic news for Newfoundland. So we're really lucky. We're really lucky. Back in September 27th, there was a bit of what we call a gazette, a staking rush. And we were really, really fortunate that we sort of were a little bit quicker than our neighbors. We were able to stake some of these claims that we call Bullseye, sitting right in here, this backwards letter H, and the property next to it that we call Glenwood. And you can see it only sits 3 to 4 kilometers north of where Newfound has been getting such fantastic intersections and discoveries. Look at that, almost 93 grams over 19 meters. I can tell you, these sort of numbers are just, they're fantastic. So here we are sitting here, and we cover about 1.2 kilometers of that trend, of that Appleton fault zone, Allan. You can see those red dashed lines. And then don't forget all those splays that are peeling off. And then our northern neighbors, Lab Gold, they've been exploring for a couple of years as well, and they're getting good looking values, 44 grams over almost 4.5 meters from Big Vein up in here. And this property here, we considered at the time in September as like it could be a company maker, right? So we were really, really fortunate to acquire that. And we've been exploring there ever since. We got our permits in sort of really quick time. The Newfoundland government's been fantastic in helping everybody. And we ran some geophysical surveys. And that's what I'm just kind of quickly trying to show here. This is that backwards letter H. These are where the discoveries are going on with Newfound. And this is where the Appleton fault zone cuts across our property. And what we use MAG and VLF to sort of map out the features of the underlying bedrock. We can't see it because it's buried under 10 to 20 feet of sand and clay. But we use geophysics to map out the structural complexities, let's say, of the underlying rock. It maps out the amount of
I'll tell you what pops out to me is you've got that secondary faulting cutting across the Appleton fault in a few areas, and then extending down that there's a network that extends down to wow.
This is what I wanted to sort of show you and your followers is you can see these low cold colored areas. These areas have been sort of, the iron has been leached out, it's been carried away from fluid flow along that Appleton fault zone. That's why you have these cold colors, and then these sort of moderate colors in here, the cyans and the greens indicate secondary faults, just like you said. And look at the blocky pattern of it, right? And there's, what's to say there could very well be quartz veins, late stage quartz veins intruding these sort of little, what we call splay structures.
Actually, that's an important part of these orogenic gold systems is those secondary faulting off the main big fault.
Yeah. So imagine you're sitting in the next picture I'm going to show you. Imagine you're just sitting there looking up the Appleton fault zone, looking up that fault zone towards the Newfoundland coast. This is what it looks like. I was out a couple of years ago on a helicopter, and I'm shooting this photograph looking up the Appleton fault zone. You can see all the drilling that Newfound is drilling here, and we're looking towards the coast. And you see the little river here, that's the Gander River. So our Bullseye property is sitting right in here. Okay,
and you can see the rocks lining up there.
Yeah, that's right. And now I'll show you a few more slides that sort of, well, this is what it looks like in core. So this is what it looks like on surface. This is what it looks like in some of our drill core. We started drilling back in February. We ended up drilling 30 holes on our Bullseye property. This is some of the core. Look at the amount of deformation. You know those slides I was showing you on plate tectonics and how you have ductile deformation and how you have brittle deformation. These rocks, you know, they'll bend and bend and bend, and then they can only take so much and snap. Look at that crack right in here. Something's got to give. And this is what you see in these quartz veins here. See how these veins are offset? And as a geologist, this really excites us. When we study the core come to surface and we look at it, we see this amount of deformation and we see these quartz veins intruding, and then they themselves get deformed and they get folded. And then another shot of quartz veins come in and basically overprint the previous veins. This really gets us excited. It means all that structural preparation that you were talking about, Allan, it happened. Look at that. That's the actual Appleton fault zone from one of the holes we drilled. Very sort of punky, gougy, soft rock. And look at how those quartz veins have been almost milled. They've been ground up and broken down from subsequent action or subsequent movement along the Appleton fault. So it's a very long-lived system.
And that's exactly what you want. Look at the visible gold there. Wow.
Yeah, and this is from we're so fortunate. This is from our very first hole. So look at the amount of breaking there. The rock almost looks like coffee grinds, doesn't it? Yeah. And then you have these quartz
and then quartz right beside it.
Exactly. Right. And some of that quartz, we're very fortunate, carries fine grains of gold in there. And this particular one assayed 14.2 grams over half a meter. I'm sitting right around in here.
If my memory serves me right, Ken, you guys had like 50 spots of visible gold in your core or something like that. Did I get that right?
One of our intercepts, and I'll show you a picture of that later, had over 50 individual grains of gold counted within the interval by the geologist logging the core.
Wow.
But this is one of the key things, whether it's one spot or 50 spots. This is the thing that really helps us. As I said, you look for veining, you look for structure, you look for the bleaching and the alteration. But once you see that grain of gold, then you know you're sort of honed in, you're clued in. This is like a beautiful sort of, let's say, verification or confirmation, is to actually see a grain of gold.
Well, and that's the other thing. You need faulting for a conduit. You need mineralization, and you need the right age of rock. So you're ticking all those important boxes.
Yeah, so we continue to drill across the Appleton fault zone, hoping to, hit a series of splays en route to the Appleton fault zone. And again, look how broken up that rock is. And this could very well be a splay en route to the main target. And then there's our quartz veins. And between the two yellow arrows, this ran 12.5 grams over 3.5 meters of core length from all the veins in there. Look at all the shots of veins pulsing through there, Alan, just shot after shot after shot. And again, some of them carry the gold. There was a high in there of 68.4 grams over 0.45. I believe that's what's actually between the yellow arrows there.
Wow.
Right? And this is what it looks like in close-up. Look at this. This is back in May when I took this photograph. We had a press release for hole number 14 to 15. But look at that in there. Nice little grain. But again, look how these fragments of the wall rock have been carried along. They've been
even
rasted
on a
up.
microscopic level, you're seeing that folding.
Yeah, exactly. And this is sort of where we are, in May and June. You can see our holes that have been drilling across the path of the Appleton fault zone. These are some of the hits and our results we've been getting from holes like hole 14 and 10. Sitting right in here, and these little hockey pucks are sort of indicating the areas of elevated gold values so far. And this is what it looks like from surface. So here's our drilling that's been going on. This is taken with a drone back before Christmas time. This is looking towards the southeast, towards the town of Gander. Look at all those holes that Newfound has been drilling. This is probably their Lotto North zone. Hole after hole after hole, drilling across that Appleton fault as it tracks up onto our Bullseye property.
Where exactly is that? They've got Everest, and they've got a couple other zones that seem to be pointing towards, in this image, would be the northeast or west.
That's right. Yeah, I'll show you. I have a map in a few minutes. I can show you a brand new updated one. So Everest is probably sitting down around in this area in here. Okay, and this new jackpot they have sits probably down around in here. Wow. I'll show you in a second. I've got a better map that'll show you, Alan.
Excellent.
And we continue drilling, and there's the Everest zone right there. So if you go back, it's probably sitting right in here.
Wow.
Right in this area here.
Really close.
So hole number 19, this is one where we saw over the 50 grains or flakes or specks of visible gold, and that's reflected by that number. It's almost 119 grams over 0.85.
when I was talking about these results in one of my previous shows, it kind of popped out to me that, look at Everest there, 36 grams over 3.7 meters. And then you're getting 38 grams over 2.8 meters, right in line with what Everest is showing.
Exactly. It's not a huge step. And Alan, this is 500 meters. These claims are 500-meter jogs or claims. So you can see we're sitting probably about 500 meters north of where the Everest guys are.
Got it.
And don't forget, then there's also all the possibility for splays peeling off.
Right. And you've actually shown some of those in a previous map.
Yeah, that's right. This is a really up-to-date map. So this is the Everest showing, let's call it, where Newfound's drilling in this area right now. And then more recently, they talked about the jackpot showing that they discovered over in here. And these are sort of my dash lines. This is purely my speculation of where these guys may be going. It's early days yet, but, you can see Newfound's
and what did you base that speculation on? I can see Everest, following parallel to the Appleton fault and going towards your property.
That's right. There's a second. I've over shown it sort of here, but it's almost like a T shape. They got their main vein running this way, and then they had a little secondary vein coming this way.
Oh,
so I just overlaid this dash line to show here, and I tried to do it for this K2 system as well here. See their red line, and I just extended it on. And this again is it's purely my speculative sort of plotting that I've done. Same with this new jackpot
so
showing.
Is it a combination of extending their zones, but then there's also the potential that you could have secondary faulting that could be why you're drawing those lines? Am I getting that right, Ken?
Yeah, I'm extending their red dashes. I'm extending their red dashes onto our property. Okay. And so I'm suggesting that these are areas that, when we do go back and resume drilling in the fourth quarter, these are areas that we'll bring the drill in to test.
Got it.
Okay. That's what that's trying to show there.
Sorry to interrupt you so much, Ken, but you got me really excited here, man.
Yeah. And see, this is what I'm trying to show here. You were just asking about that. This is the Everest showing up in that corner of the property. And you see they have some veins running like this. And they've plotted some veins running like that. So that's, I just have basically carried them on as far as I'm concerned that, there's a potential for that vein system to continue on to the property this way, or this new vein to cut through here. So we laid out two holes, hole 27 and 28 across the path of those. We're waiting on the results of those right now. We haven't got the results back from the lab, but these are the interesting intersections that we've had so far that we've been talking about. This is hole 19 with that 100 specks of visible gold. It only sits a couple hundred meters north of our claim line. Maybe this does link up to the Everest system, or maybe this is more sort of intimate with the Appleton fault zone as it cuts through. We'll just have to see as we drill more and more.
Got it.
And so we sort of had taken a step back. We're waiting on results from the last 10 holes of our program. We drilled 30 holes, about 11,000 meters or so. And we're taking a step back now for 3 or 4 months because we don't know. I'm being honest here. We don't know, Allan, if there's other opportunities along the Appleton. We know that right now there's sort of an epicenter thing going on with all the discoveries being made down in this area. But there's been next to no exploration carried on further along the Appleton or any of these possible splays that geophysics indicates. So we figured we owe it to ourselves and to our investors to sort of take a step back. And as we wait for the results to come in from the last of our Bullseye and Horseshoe drilling, we've sent our crews up into this area to start prospecting and what we call ground truthing. Because who knows, these might occur like at a repetitious sort of cycle every 5, every 7 kilometers, we don't know, along the Appleton. And this is where you have the next major sort of blowout of veining. So we want to get in there and assess these claims that we've acquired, what we call Gazebo South, and look for possible splays. So that's how we're spending our summer. That's how we're spending our summer vacation, is in here trying to make up, I guess you'd say, a shopping list or a report card of indications of where we want to bring the drill back to in the late fall.
Well, I can see in Gazebo there, if you could go back a second, I can see that the secondary faulting, and down at Glenwood where there's the star, I can see a couple kinks in that fault, which could indicate even more rock preparation that's conducive to gold mineralization.
Exactly. And what's to say, that 10 years from now, after all the exploration has sort of gone on the Appleton, and companies like Exploits and our neighbors have moved on to these other faults, you may see a lot more of these yellow and blue stars running along these other fault zones as well. It's still very much early days, right?
Brand new, really.
Yeah. That's right. It's opening up. And this area was certainly prospected a lot back in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s by companies like Noranda and Keats and the Stairs and everybody like that. But, it still requires an awful lot of sleuthing ahead of us to sort of continue to accurately sort of appraise the opportunities here.
Got it.
This is what Bullseye looks like after the snow melted, right? As you can see, as the snow was melting, we were drilling. So we sent out our prospectors right away. And all these little red lines are all the traverses that our prospectors did on Bullseye. So there's our horseshoe drilling going on right here. And look at all the sort of the GPS.
That's all quartz and white.
Those are all quartz boulders in white, quartz fragments that they found, like here, poking up through the surface, up through the snow and the orb. We've sent them out for analyzing, and we're waiting on the results of those as well.
That's very exciting.
Yeah. And now the guys are going into the gazebo property. We know there's quartz veins in there. Look at these big knobs of quartz sticking up through the swamp. This one doesn't carry gold, but they're still very exciting. They're still showing that a large volume of quartz intruded through that Appleton fault zone. And this is 20 kilometers away from Bullseye. So there's still a very active system going on. Look at these fragments here, Allan, of rafts or chunks the size of footballs or watermelons of quartz being floated up through the surface. So over the next few months, we're going to be doing some airborne geophysics. We're doing this Lidar survey, which I'm trying to show with this picture of the helicopter here, to sort of map out on the centimeter scale the bedrock features. And our crews are out there every day prospecting and mapping. They come across this sort of stuff, they get excited, they come running back to their office.
For the non-geo out there, can the Lidar is able to map the bedrock below the vegetation, and that has a way of showing some anomalies popping out. Like I remember back in the day, you used to have to do satellite imagery, and they had guys that just specialized in that alone. Now it's much easier with these Lidar surveys to get the surface expressions of those features popping out like a sore thumb.
That's right. So you can see it mounted on the nose of the helicopter here. It is able to see down through all this thick vegetation. It's able to, these light rays are able to sort of almost like radar to shoot down through all the vegetation, through the heavy trees, through all the mud and the muck sitting on top of the bedrock, and sort of map out these features more clearly. They call it a bare earth model. It's almost like all the vegetation has been removed and you've just been left over with bare earth. And that's why it's such an effective system. And this, you can pick or choose your density of information you want, but I mean, I've seen them before. When I was with Gold Corp, we flew in over the Timmins there. You could see the pitcher's mound. And Allan, you could see the pitcher's rubber on the center of the pitcher's mound. There's that much detail. It's a fantastic mapping tool. And the guys,
it really gives you an impression of the surface expressions of those features that are deeper.
That's right. Exactly. So here's sort of like a little map. The guys have been doing some prospecting already over the past couple of weeks at Gazebo South, about 20 kilometers north of Bullseye. And you can see these, even the lakes, Allan, are lined up with the lineaments of the Appleton fault zone and possibly the splays that peel off it. So that LiDAR was sort of, it will give us further focus and say, hey, there's some little valleys here or some little low-lying areas that you should get out to, and you should send your crews back to continue doing prospecting, because there's maybe, you know, the creeks tend to follow structural weakness zones, and it'll give us, the LiDAR will give us much more refinement on where to send our crews.
But when you start seeing that quartz in close proximity to the faulting, and you see the folding,
look at that.
It's game on, right? As an exploration story. You're confirming what you need to see.
Yeah, this slide sort of covers everything. You've got the shearing going on. Look how fissile all these sediments are. They've been broken down into small pieces. You've got some oxidization going here. The iron is rusting out, and you have a quartz vein coming through here. These are very important check marks for a prospector.
Right.
And then earlier, you and I were talking about the seismic survey that Newfound is undertaking in that general Appleton area. This is a a huge effort on their part. It's a fantastic story. We're very fortunate. We sort of gave them permission to carry their lines up through our Bullseye property. You can see the Gander River there. This is back in the springtime. And you can see the seismic lines coming through. And this is really cutting edge technology, at least when it comes to looking for gold. And hopefully this will help Newfound sort of work out the architecture, the deep-seated architecture going down underneath their discoveries. And these lines, as I said, sort of project onto our Bullseye property. And we'll have a sort of a snapshot of information here that can only help us out as well. So
Yeah,
we're
Ken,
really
as I mentioned,
what's going on.
I spent a good portion of my career in diamond exploration, and we had a sill, a flat-lying body that we ran seismic over. And it's really interesting because the seismic can give you the layering of the rock, or stratigraphic horizons is the way to explain it. But really it's layering of the rock. Think of a tree, the rings of a tree. Earth is kind of like the rings of a tree over time. And in addition to seeing the layering, you can also see where there's breaks in the geophysics, which give you an idea of where the structures are. So I'm really excited about this seismic work, and I wasn't aware that it will continue onto your property, Ken. So you guys got to be really excited about that work that Newfound Gold is doing with this seismic.
We are. They've been fantastic neighbors. So yeah, we're really, really fortunate.
Excellent.
And again, this is just sort of wrapping things up. And I can't, as a geologist, I can't stress how important it is to have boots on the ground crews out there to follow those sort of things up. I mean, it's fantastic to have seismic surveys. It's fantastic to use Lidar to better define your targets. But in the end, you need a good, dedicated local team to get out there to do the rough stuff, to get out there and prospect and map and sort of add reality to what we're seeing that's implied, things like geophysics or Lidar, right? They collect their samples, and that's the ultimate test is when we send those samples off to the lab and the results come back from the lab. That's the ultimate test.
Some call that old-fashioned geology, walking around looking down, but when you look down and you see the features and quartz, you guys got to get excited because of what's in the area, and
we are.
You're confirming your theory, if you will.
Yeah. No, it's a great place to be, and as I've said a few times now, for me, I imagine this is what it was like in the Val d'Or, the Kirkland Lake, or the Timmins area back in 1920, 1930. So it's a fantastic opportunity, and please keep an eye on things, watch how we proceed through the summer, keep watching out for our news and our press releases, and it's sort of full speed ahead for us.
Ken, a lot of times I think that some people don't get really excited about this kind of work, but when you present it like you just have, it brings to life the work that you're doing to sort of, okay, this is how we go about making a new discovery. This is what we're looking for. So it adds a lot of color or excitement to what they'll see a news release explaining it. But when you put it into pictures like this, Ken, it's very enlightening, and I love this sort of stuff. I wish more companies would do these videos and pictures and try to explain it, not just from a geological perspective, but how the average investor out there can understand things better. Good on you.
You should produce a new go to Hollywood and produce a new show. You can call it CSI Appleton.
Hey, maybe that's the best way to get some financing, Ken.
Yeah. Anyways, that's pretty much it for me as far as my slides go.
Okay, I'll get you back off the. There's your team, Shanda and Jeff.
Okay, I'll stop. Yeah, how to get in touch with us if you need to, and I will stop my share.
Yeah, good. Well, yeah, Ken, it's I'm really impressed with what you guys have done outside of Newfound Gold. they've been drilling up a storm and doing a lot of work and making a lot of discoveries, and there's a lot of work going on around there. But you guys might have, outside of that newfound gold, you guys might have the most exciting ground in that region.
Well, that's what we're certainly hoping for.
Yeah, yeah. So can you give us a brief idea of what's pending from your drilling?
Okay. We're still waiting on the results from the lab, from the local lab, from the drilling from the holes that we've submitted after hole number 15. That was our press release. So we still have results coming in, or sorry, hole number 19. So we still have results, I believe, from 12 holes. They're coming in on a weekly basis. We're hoping that we'll have all the results in, I would say, towards the end of July. The way it's going, we're getting really good turnaround from Eastern Analytical, and we're just like I said, the results are coming in 2 or 3 times a week, and we're compiling them, and we're making sure we do all our quality checks on them. And like I said, just stay tuned, and hopefully we'll have some more press releases coming out about our diamond drilling towards the end of the month.
Ken, we had a very interesting conversation before you came on, and you've spent a lot of time in that Abitibi region. And tell us a little bit about your career, because I think it helps the investor out there in exploits to better understand that the company's in very good hands with you.
Oh, thanks. I graduated from University of New Brunswick in Atlantic Canada back in '84, and it was sort of just at the start of the very first wave of flow-through spending that went through in around '86, '87, '88. And I was very fortunate to work with John Hansold in a company called Canamax Resources. He'd sort of spearheaded. He was sort of the father of the flow-through funding scenarios. And so I was very fortunate. I worked in the Wawa area and throughout northern Ontario, northern Quebec, getting more and more experience. And then from Canamax, I went on to work for Noranda Exploration. And that's where I first started working with a lot of people from Newfoundland. And then from Noranda, I went on for a 20-year run through the transition from Kinross Gold, working with Bob Buchan, through Placer Dome, and then through Gold Corp. And it was while I was working with that 20-year run that I got a lot of underground experience, working at the fantastic Hoyle Pond deposit in Timmins, working on feasibility studies at the old Hollinger mine, or expanding the Dome mine. So I got that view of the reality of working underground and the fact that it is a business, and how hard the miners and the engineers have to work and have to design their day-to-day mining operations to turn a profit, and the importance of quality control. And so I got a lot of really good foundational experience there. And then I went on and spent 5 years working with Rob McEwen at the Black Fox and the Stock deposits. Really enjoyed that. And then I just sort of heard from a recruiter as things were starting to build up in the Newfoundland area. And I've been sort of following it on the news, hearing about Newfoundland's sort of successes, like I'm sure a lot of people have. And I looked at it as an opportunity to sort of finish my career working at the early stages. I'd spent most of the last, let's say, 20 or 25 years working in existing operations, where everywhere you look, you could see a head frame or an open pit. So this was a chance for me to get back to basics. And I mean, I did my homework first, and I looked at the fantastic land position that Exploits had. And I sort of met with Jeff and Shanda and realized what a great team they had. And I just thought, for me personally, it was a sort of a great way to sort of wrap up my career. And so I made the move. I made the jump to working as a vice president for a small junior in Newfoundland. And it's been really great so far. It's really enjoyable. I get down there every few weeks to sort of check on the crew, make sure things are going well. They're a fantastic group of guys and girls in Gander. We have about a dozen local geologists and prospectors based there. And it's a joy to work with. It's just a lot of fun, and it's like I said, it reminds me of probably what it was like in the early days in the bigger mining camps.
You know, as you were explaining that, it kind of clicked on me of something that we talked about earlier. You've had the opportunity on many occasions to see what those rocks look like underground.
Yeah.
And then you're presenting what you're seeing at surface. And I think there's a reason why you do a very good job of that, Ken, because you sort of you've spent a lot of time underground looking at what the rocks look like, and you're seeing it at the surface. And that's why I think you emphasize quite nicely how important that stuff is at surface to look for what's underground.
That's right. For sure. Years ago when I was doing diamond drilling underground at the Hoyle Pond mine, we were down at the 880 level, 880 meters below surface. The mine is well beyond, I think it's down on the 1200 meter level now, and or beyond. And you'll look at those things, you can touch them and feel them in 3D, and that's so important for a geologist to get that viewpoint. And it's tough to do when you're looking at just up on surface, or you're looking at drill core that's only a couple inches in diameter, right?
But you got to start up there to see what's underground.
To get down there, exactly. And at some point you have to take that leap of faith and design your drill holes at depth to see how things are going at depth. And that's why we're very lucky that this system, this Appleton system, either whether it's with Newfound or with exploits, or up to the north with Lab, the vein systems so far, from what we're hearing about and seeing, they're open. They remain open to depth.
Yeah, well, I really enjoyed this conversation, Ken, and I appreciate it because you're sort of giving us a very good understanding of what to look for at the surface to lead you deeper. And again, I really think more companies should do that. Because it adds a lot of life to that early exploration, that boots on the ground exploration that's going to potentially lead you to success.
That's right. As a geologist, I can't recommend strongly enough, if other geologists are watching this show and they're starting off in their careers, at some point over the next 5 to 10 years, try really hard to get on with a company that provides you with an opportunity to get underground. It's a very important feature in developing your career, seeing it in that third dimension.
Well, actually, we saw right here in this presentation why it is important. You looked at what things look like underground, and you're applying that to what's happening at the surface. Thank you very much, Ken. It's been a wonderful conversation, and I think really helpful to my audience. I always try to break that geology down into simplified terms, and you've shown it in pictures. Thank you very much, Ken.
No, thank you. I found it quite enjoyable. Thank you, Alan. I appreciate the opportunity.
Okay, I'm going to wrap it up, and we can talk a little bit at the other end.
Okay, thank you. And just keep an eye over the next few months on how exploits is proceeding. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. Well, I'll be keeping an eagle eye on this project because I'm quite impressed with a lot of what Ken was talking about here. That Everest discovery that Newfound is found in the northern end in very close proximity, where exploits is also drilled into very similar kind of grades. And then as you go down the west side of their claim blocks, you've got projection potential of zones that have been found by Newfound Gold. Now, of course, you need more drilling, but there's additional evidence that could be the case because you've got a network of secondary faulting on the east side yes. of that stuff that Newfound Gold is finding. So they call this project the Bullseye, and I think they've got themselves a heck of a target there. And The Truth Machine is already speaking, and they've got other projects that are well situated on key faults. So this is an exciting orogenic, emerging orogenic gold discovery company. As always, my shows are for information purposes only. I mean these to be sort of maybe part of your due diligence on exploits in this case. But then, of course, you need to speak with your financial advisors to assess whether this makes sense for your risk profile, and do the homework. I don't care what sector you're in. Go to the websites, look at their news releases, look at their corporate presentations, and give the company a call. These small companies love to talk about their projects, and it really brings the work that they're doing to life. So do that homework, check out exploits, and as Ken said, watch for more results, and I hope to have future conversations with Ken. Ken, again, thank you very much for your time.
Oh, thanks. I really appreciate it. I always love these opportunities.